Hello, everyone. Welcome to our final recorded lecture for the class. We're going to be summing everything up that we've discussed throughout the course of the semester in this brief lecture on the practices for longevity and well-being. So we've covered a number of different topics and subjects this semester: stress and psychological well-being, communications and relationships, exercise and physical movement, healthy eating practices, information around sexual and reproductive health, substance use and addiction. This week, we've covered chronic disease. And lastly, we're going to summarize all of the practices that can reduce the risk of developing chronic disease and improve your longevity long term. So we're basically going to put a nice little neat bow on everything we've covered this semester and sum it all up with some major takeaways and healthy habits that you can prioritize moving forward to reduce your risk of developing chronic disease, improve your physical well-being, and improve your psychological and emotional well-being as well. You'll see that research shows that there are some specific healthy habits that can do all three of those important things. So our goal for this brief lecture is to review the relationship between our lifestyle behaviors and the development of chronic lifestyle-related diseases. And then we're going to examine the habits of people in the blue zones, which we've mentioned so many times this semester. We're finally going to take a deep dive into what those zones are and how those habits contribute to healthy aging, longevity, and psychological well-being. Let's dive in. So a brief review of how lifestyle behaviors impact the development of chronic disease. We covered chronic disease this week, things like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, cancer, and we know that 7 of the top 10 leading killers in the United States and other developed countries come from these chronic diseases. Now, these are diseases that usually last a year or more, and rather than being transmissible through viruses, bacteria, or other pathogens, these diseases develop gradually over the long term because of our lifestyle behaviors, the behaviors that we perform or don't perform. So this includes things like tobacco or other substance use, using alcohol or not, engaging in regular physical activity or not, eating a nutritious diet or not. Those are the 4 biggest major categories that we can look at when looking at the development of our chronic diseases like cancer, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, etc. There are other additional behaviors that fall in line with those and beyond that we're going to cover in this lecture today. And it's important to know that these things contribute both to our lifespan, how long we live, and our health span, which is arguably just as important. Our health span is the number of our quality or healthy years. We want our health span and our lifespan to match up as closely as possible so we can enjoy our final years here on this earth. An important thing to know is that genetics, of course, matter. Yes, your genetics impact your risk of developing a chronic disease. So too does your environment and the things around you. But our behaviors are the things within our immediate control. And that's what we're going to look at today. So we're going to go more deep into some of the strategies that can promote your long-term well-being. And in doing that, we're going to look at the blue zones and find the research-proven keys to longevity and well-being. So what are these blue zones that we've been referencing all semester? The blue zones are the regions of the world that have been found to have the highest number of centenarians. And centenarians is just a fancy word for people who live to 100 and beyond. So people who live a century or more. Now, this research was carried out by a man named Dan Buettner, who's written the book called The Blue Zones, supported by National Geographic in the early 2000s. And he went around the world and looked at data trying to find these blue zones where they had high numbers of centenarians. And then they conducted research. What did these areas have in common that allowed people to live so long and so well? So some of the areas that they found around the world that they deemed blue zones are across multiple different continents. We have Okinawa, Japan, Icaria, Greece, Sardinia, Italy, and then over here on our continent, we have the Nicoya Peninsula of Costa Rica, and we even have one in the United States in California, the only one here in the US, is in the community of Loma Linda up in middle or Northern California. And so they looked at these places and said, what do they all have in common that allows people to live so long and so well? And they found 9 similar threads throughout these regions. Let's look at them here. These are referred to as the Power 9, the 9 common blue zone habits. While they may be carried out differently in each of these regions, they're similar across all of them. So let's look at each one, and then we'll define some specific strategies within each region after. So we have move naturally. We know that regular exercise is one of the top 2 predictors for longevity, exercise, and social support. So moving naturally is an important piece. And you'll recall from our section on physical activity that it doesn't have to be high intensity gym burnout sessions or cycling classes or any other specific type of training to count. While those things are awesome, and I highly encourage you to do whatever form of exercise you enjoy, the key here is just regular movement often. So it's not enough to sit on your couch, your chair, your computer screen all day and then do 30 minutes of activity a couple times a week to promote this long-term health that we're looking for. You do want to incorporate that regular structured exercise, but what they find when they look at the blue zones is that they're getting regular physical activity sprinkled in throughout their day. None of them are doing structured exercise like yoga or cycling classes or weightlifting sessions in the gym. All of them are doing active transit or active work, meaning they're sheep herders or they walk to work or to their friends' houses or to the places in their community rather than using things like cars or computers to get the job done. So we'll look at some specific strategies for enhancing your ability to move naturally in your environment in just a minute. The next one is right outlook. So this is how you interact and cope with the world. You might think of this when we go back to our mental health and stress modules that we covered way back at the beginning of class. So 2 key characteristics for right outlook are know your purpose and downshift. And we've talked about purpose a couple times in the class, and you'll actually get a chance this week to try out creating a personal constitution or mission statement that outlines your values and specific purpose. You'll also get to take a VIA character strength assessment, which looks at your specific character strengths so you can determine how to apply them to your purpose and your life. Having a purpose and a sense of meaning is essential for humans to thrive. And many of these cultures have easy to articulate senses of purpose among the individuals within them. So think about yourself in your own life, your work, your hobbies, your interests, your families or friends, your volunteer opportunities. What is your purpose in these places? How are you making an impact in the world? This all sounds kind of fluffy and maybe a little hokey, but it's really an important piece of your personal well-being to have an easily identifiable purpose that you live out. Downshift. Whew, this is a big one, especially in the times that we're in. This means finding ways to manage your stress levels. So this can include things like limiting the hours that you work, which many of these places do. They're not in this constant connectivity where we're at work and then we're constantly glued to our email or working after hours. They slow down or possibly take on less, and they prioritize time for vacations or time together away from work. So we'll look at some specific steps there as well. This is a really challenging one for us in our current environment where we focus so much on productivity and there's so much to get done. Eat wisely. So we have a couple specific strategies around nutrition. We'll recall from our nutrition module that the Japanese have a tenet called hara hachibu, which means eat until 80% full. So rather than aiming to be totally full or stuffed at the end of a meal, eat where you have a little bit of room left in the tank and give your body some time to catch up. These regions all include more vegetables and plant-based foods, less meat, and very little processed food. So they often include lots of things like beans, lentils, or soy for their protein sources. They all include big portions of vegetables in their meals, and many of them include small portions of meat or fish throughout the day or week. but much less than we do here in America. And certainly they include very little amounts of ultra processed foods, things like chips, crackers, cookies, fast food, etc. We know that the more close to nature our food resembles, or the more our food looks like the form it's found in nature, generally the better it is for us. And then lastly, this will be a fun one for some of you. They do find that with the exception of one, the Loma Linda region in California, all of these areas include about a glass of red wine or similar alcoholic beverage daily. Now, we don't know if this is something specific to wine itself, like the polyphenols that we mentioned in our substance use section, or if this is something related to downshifting and relaxation related to having a glass of alcohol. Lastly, we have belong. Like I said, the two biggest predictors of longevity are regular physical activity and social connection. So social connection is so important for our physical, emotional, and psychological well-being. So this includes things like creating a healthy social network. Friend, family, or other peer group connections are key structures in many of these areas. They find that in a lot of these regions, grandparents live in or near the house, which improves the health of all three generations living at home. And they find that many of these regions also have close ties or social networks that they exist in throughout their life. Connect or reconnect with religion. Many of or all of these regions have different religious focuses that they follow. So it's not that they all follow one particular right religion. It's that most of the individuals in these regions belong to some faith-based group. And research shows that this enhances well-being and longevity. So again, there's something with that social connection built around similar values, morals, and ideals that can get us outside of our own head and improve our health. And lastly, all of these regions, as I mentioned before, prioritize family. So we see families living close together, staying in close units, and multiple generations living in or near the home. So let's break these down into some specific steps for each of these four categories. Looking at eat wisely, some simple things that you can do to move towards the Hara Hachi Bu principle is to use smaller plates or bowls. You'll naturally fill up with less food by trying to cover less space. Think about adding before subtracting when making nutritional changes. This means where can you include things in our P2F acronym? Protein, produce, and healthy fats, specifically focusing on the produce when thinking about the blue zones. So where in your day can you add in fruits and vegetables, and how can you make it easy to do so? How can you buy, wash, and prepare them in advance so they're ready to go as easy as a bag of chips? And lastly, set aside time to eat. Stop the productivity focus for a few minutes for at least one meal or snack a day to just focus on the food, to take a break, to enjoy, especially around other people, friends, family, or coworkers, whenever possible. This hits a lot of things. It'll help you eat less, enjoy and appreciate your food more, make healthier food choices, have some time for downshifting, and support the need for social connection. When we look at moving naturally, the first key is find an activity that you enjoy, whether it's dancing, walking, aerobics, swimming, cycling, gardening, you name it. If you can incorporate something that involves an active part of your day, such as walking to work, the store, a friend's house, or thinking about ways that your job incorporates physical movement or that you can boost the physical movement in your job, such as getting up and walking over to speak with a coworker rather than sending an email, or taking a walk on your lunch break, or if you already have an active job like working in the service industry. We've covered research that shows that counting and thinking of that movement as exercise can actually improve your physical health. Lastly, you want to focus on having some of this exercise be outdoors. We know that outdoor exercise confers unique benefits, health benefits on individuals. So it's a good idea to get outside for at least a few minutes a day when the weather allows. Belonging. Okay, if you're not already involved, join a club, community group, or other faith-based organization that you can build strong social groups around. This is especially important coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic. Find local ways to volunteer that can confer unique health benefits. And there's a link here in the PowerPoint to opportunities for volunteering in San Diego. And prioritize regular time to meet with your friends, family, coworkers, or other peers. It's so easy to push this aside to focus on productivity, getting things done, our regular tasks in the daily life that we live. This is really difficult for me at times, but I always feel better after a social interaction than I did before, even when I didn't want to go. Lastly, right outlook. Determine your own unique character strengths and values as a starting point for developing your sense of meaning and purpose. So like I mentioned, you'll get to do the VIA character strengths assessment this week. This is also a component of positive psychology, optimizing your experience in life. And you can find your top 5 character strengths and start thinking about how you can apply these things to your personal or professional lives. Schedule time to downshift. Find some times in your days, weeks, or months to do stress-reducing activities that you enjoy that have nothing to do with getting things done. I know this is really hard, especially for those of you who are working, going to school, raising children, helping with family, etc. Even if it's just 1 minute. 1 minute to turn everything off, close your eyes and notice what's happening in the space around you. 1 minute of jumping jacks, 1 minute of journaling, something to downshift on a regular basis. And lastly, if you can't do it all, if you can't hit every bullet point in all of these 4 categories, give yourself a break. Self-compassion is an important key of right outlook and downshifting as well. It's not reasonable or realistic for all of us to implement all of these things in our modern culture right now, but pick 1 or 2 to start with and build from there. Okay, so our final takeaways for this lecture, this module, and this class. The things that you do now matter for reducing your risk of developing chronic lifestyle-related diseases, improving your longevity, and your psychological well-being. So all of these habits that we've discussed here and in the class as a whole build up to result in a healthier, happier you. These habits can improve your lifespan, how long you live, your health span, your number of healthy years, and your mental and emotional health. I think that's the important key here, is that so many of these things we talk about in terms of living longer, reducing your risk of chronic disease, and being more physically healthy and robust. But we see that many of these same behaviors and activities, the nutritional strategies, the exercise strategies, the social connection, meaning and belonging strategies, are these same behaviors that support our emotional and psychological well-being. And lastly, meaning, purpose, and connection. So finding your values and the impact you want to make in the world and connecting with important others is so crucial for your long-term well-being and contentment. Again, it's easy to think about, I have to eat perfectly and exercise a ton, eat less, move more, and do all the right steps and the right habits, and forget about the connection, the support, the meaning and belonging piece. But these are really the key drivers of long-term well-being that will allow you to do all of the other things. And you'll notice I use the word contentment rather than happiness here. You'll watch a really brief video from Dr. Andrew Weil, who brought us our 4-7-8 breath way back in the beginning of the semester. And he talks about, and actually has a book on the topic of contentment versus happiness. And he suggests that many of our modern cultures and societies strive to be happy all the time. And we feel as though we must be happy all the time, or we're doing it wrong, or we're failing. He suggests that this is not a natural state of being. Rather, we should aim for a content core, a resting ground or space of contentment where we can move into our happier and more joyful emotions and down into our sadder and despairing and more difficult emotions, and then return back to our content center as quickly as possible. So that's a helpful shift for me, and maybe it is for you. When I think more about being content with my life and where I'm at, I feel less pressure and stress about being happy. Lastly, I'll leave you with this quote from poet Mary Oliver, and this is the end of one of her famous poems. And she says, tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? And I want to leave you with that thought here as we wrap up our semester, thinking about the importance of meaning, purpose, connection, healthy nutritional and exercise and stress relieving practices, communication and relationships, healthy sexual practices and substance use practices. Thinking about all of these things and focusing on that meaning, purpose, and connection. What is it that you want to do with your one wild and precious life? Because ultimately, health is only a means to an end to do all the other things that you love and enjoy and find a life that delivers contentment and maybe a little bit of happiness too. All right, take care. I'm always here for you with extra questions, thoughts, insights as you move forward with your education and your careers and your life. Come back, talk to me, drop me an email, take other classes with me. I love to hear about your success moving forward. Thank you for sharing this semester with me. I wish you contentment, health, and a little happiness too.